The NHL season is in its last 10 games for almost every team, but which team has the most pressure on it heading into the playoffs? We'll talk about that and a lot more next on this week's NHL Squad.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show, sponsored by Game Time. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the NHL Squad. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we get you ready for another wild week across the NHL. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I'm joined today by Tom Callahan of Locked On Utah Hockey Club and the Mondo Man, Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers. Gentlemen, great to have you on board today. We have reached April. This is it. Last month of the regular season. In fact, kind of the last half month, if you will. And one thing that I think is on a lot of people's minds as we get closer to the playoffs is which teams across the league have the most pressure on them heading into the playoffs. And Armando, since you are covering the defending Stanley Cup champions, how much pressure is there on Florida to repeat?
I don't think there's as much pressure on the Florida Panthers to repeat. It doesn't mean there's not pressure for them whatsoever, but hey, they've proven themselves. And right now with kind of the injury situation for them, they're kind of hobbling right now, and they haven't had a regulation win since they defeated this one team that in regulation just a few weeks ago that I'm about to mention of who actually has pressure. And it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. The last Panthers regulation win came on March 13th against those same Maple Leafs. And for the whole situation with Toronto, it's the fact that Mitch Marner is a free agent. John Tavares is, although he's probably going to take less money, he's a 30-goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year as well. They finally have a tandem in Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz, a coaching change, which their style of play has changed. Although they're maybe not the most flashy, entertaining as they were under Sheldon Keefe, there's a lot of pressure on the Toronto Maple Leafs in order to win more than 2 rounds for them. And if they don't even win a single round, I think Mitch Marner is as good as gone. I'm going to put the New York Rangers up there for them as well, for maybe a coaching change that could happen. Could they bring John Tortorella back to New York City? And another one, I'm going to go out west. I'm going to go with the Vancouver Canucks, who was 1 game away from advancing to the Western Conference Final, and then the regression from that to just being on the playoff bubble for them. The injuries to their goaltender, the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson drama that happened throughout the season, the whole Rick Tocchet being connected to the Philadelphia Flyers as well. That's the pressure, the 3 teams that I feel the most pressure when it comes to making the playoffs or actually doing something in the postseason.
So, Armando, let me ask you, I want to dig into this. You say there's not a lot of pressure on the Panthers to repeat. Is that because of the sense of the injuries around the team right now? Is it kind of, all right, we'll figure it out once everybody gets healthy? Or why are you saying there's not as much pressure to repeat? I'm curious.
I would say that there's not a lot of pressure to repeat because it's the fact that they've already done it already for them. So it's not as much national pressure. Maybe internal pressure there is for them because they have a lot of decisions coming up for what's going to happen with Aaron Ekblad and Sam Bennett. They're going to have to keep one of them, but they cannot keep both of them. So this might be, and the reason why Bill Zito went after the Brad Marchands of the world, a backup goaltender in Vitek Vanacek, Nico Sturm, who's a Stanley Cup champion with the Colorado Avalanche. It's more internal pressure for them that they feel as opposed to national pressure for them. And I'm just mostly talking from a national perspective when it comes to that.
As far as the Maple Leafs are concerned, here's a team that hasn't won a Stanley Cup since 1967, hasn't been to a final since 1967. Note to everybody, there were 6 teams in the NHL the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won a Stanley Cup, and now there's 32 teams. You talked about Marner and Tavares and sort of that window possibly closing on them. How big is the pressure? I mean, Tom, how tough would it be to be a Maple Leaf right now?
Well, I grew up 90 miles from that media market. And I can tell you it's insane at the best of times. That is, I mean, even when the Blue Jays were winning World Series in the early 90s, that was nice. But all the talk, all the time was about Toronto Maple Leafs. How are they going to do this? So the pressure is intense. And as you mentioned, so there's been a couple of interesting things along the road to this, right? Remember how awful this John Tavares contract was in the beginning, according to everybody. And they decided to keep him, interestingly enough. And I think he's been a very underrated part of it, but he had to deal with that pressure in the beginning. And then Austin Matthews, well, why isn't he scoring 174 goals this year? Well, he's got to deal with that pressure. Mitch Marner is always being traded. What's going on with him? They've signed some bad goaltending contracts, right? I mean, we remember the Jack Campbell fiasco. Like they have really struggled, and now they're like, oh, Joseph Wool's the man if he's healthy. So Toronto has so much pressure on it right now. And if you look at how bunched up, and Armando, you know this, how bunched up the top of that division is. Yeah. You know, Tampa could do it. Florida could do it. Leafs could do it. Does it matter to them to win the division? I think there's even pressure to do that. But this team has got to show at some point they can hold a 3-1 series lead. They've got to show that they can score enough goals to get past an opposition when their goaltending isn't great. But they also conversely need great goaltending. And the defense is always under question. So, Gil, to me, I mean, what isn't pressure in Toronto right now? Probably out of all the markets in the NHL, the most pressure is on the Leafs.
And I think first place is important because you come in second place, you're going to face one of the 3 teams that are contending for that division. You come in first place, you're probably getting Ottawa in the first round. And no disrespect to Ottawa, but they are not in the same class as of right now as Florida, Toronto, and Tampa Bay.
But they have Ullmark, and if Ullmark gets hot, he could steal you a series. They improved at the deadline. They picked up a Dylan Cousins. Like Ottawa's sneaky better. Do not look past Ottawa.
I'm not looking past them, but if you give me a choice out of those 4 teams who I want to play, Ottawa would be my first choice.
Yeah. There's almost no good opponent, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's crazy. A week ago, even before the Panthers started falling behind in the division standings, which we're recording this on a Monday, the thing is that of all the 3 teams fighting for the top, the one who has the biggest advantage is the Tampa Bay Lightning, actually, because they have no sets of back-to-backs the rest of the way, while both the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers have multiple back-to-backs the rest of the way. The Florida Panthers will have 2 sets just this in the next 6 days alone for them. So it's it's going to be a scratching and clawing to the finish. And the thing is that these teams all play each other. The Panthers played the Leafs twice and the Tampa Bay Lightning once before the end of the regular season. So it's going to be earned. It's going to have to be earned for the top of the division for them.
And then you're going to get those dreaded 3-point games in there where it goes to overtime or it goes to a shootout and both teams end up with points. How about the 2 teams in the Metropolitan Division that I sort of wanted to contrast? You have the Washington Capitals, who have surprised everybody with their success this year. And then the Carolina Hurricanes, who always seem to be in the mix, but never seem to be able to finish and win the cup in recent years. How much pressure is on each of those teams as we head down the stretch?
I feel like Washington's the ultimate example right now of we're not supposed to be here. So they've done it the right way. They've built quietly, and it does help that Ovi is having the year he's having because he's chasing that record, right? He has extra inspiration, even though it's personal and selfish. It's winning them hockey games. So everything's kind of aligning. They have 2 fantastic goaltenders. They've done a lot of good things. They have a great coach. They have a system everybody's bought into. They're having a year that every time I look at the standings, I can't believe it. But I don't think there's as much pressure on Washington because they're not supposed to be here. I think there is a ton of pressure on Carolina. That is a team that, let's be honest, every year people nationally, not just, locally, are picking them maybe first, maybe second. Yes, a deep cup run. Look at this roster. How could we not make a difference? We went out and got this guy. We went out and got that guy. Things don't seem to work out. Players don't stay, Jake Gensel. I'm wondering what is going on in Carolina.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Washington front. Thankfully, they've been able to retool and also just be so great with developing players as well. Lane Hudson's brother, Cole Hudson, is in the system. They just signed Ryan Leonard to a 3-year entry-level deal. So that transition for post-Ovi is actually going to be great, in my opinion, and also getting Jacob Chikrin to a long-term extension as the John Carlson future replacement for them on their blue line. But when it comes to Carolina, aren't they exactly where we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season based on everything they lost? And then there was that quick spurt of getting Mikko Rantanen into the mix and then him not wanting there and then right back to square one when it came to that. So I think Carolina is exactly where we thought they were going to be. And the thing is, they're multiple points behind Washington, but multiple points ahead of New Jersey. So they're kind of like locked in and just in this middle in when it comes to the Metropolitan Division. And honestly, I would be surprised if they represented the Metropolitan Division in the Eastern Conference Final based on the Capitals' lack of experience with their role players outside of Ovechkin and Tom Wilson. But I just think that when it comes to Carolina, as far as like winning it all, I don't see it. I don't see it for them. But they do have a lot of expiring contracts coming off the books, and it's mostly guys in their 30s that are going to be coming off. Orlov, Brent Burns, Jordan Staal. So they're going to be able to use their cap space in order to get younger guys into the mix. So I think this was always going to be a gap year for the Carolina Hurricanes.
We shall see how that plays out as we head down the stretch. Lot more to talk about here on the Squad Show. Other teams facing a lot of pressure or a little bit of pressure or maybe playing with house money. We'll break it all down next on the NHL Squad. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com. So a few other teams I wanted to talk about. The Ottawa Senators, the Montreal Canadiens. Ottawa looks like they're finally getting in. But, I mean, I would assume there's more pressure on Ottawa to get in than to go on a long run.
I would say so for Ottawa, because I mean, even their previous management, Pierre Dorian, said, "Oh, the rebuild's over. We're gonna be in." And to think that even in the beginning of Michael Enlauer's tenure as the owner of the Ottawa Senators, they get fined due to mistakes that happened with the previous management for them. So it's a little bit of a setback there as far as like what they're able to use as far as trades for them, but also what they've been able to do with getting on the deadline with Dylan Cousins for Josh Norris. And then the moment that Josh Norris is traded, he gets hurt with the Buffalo Sabres. So you're thinking, and then they get a draft pick along with that. And then just up and down when it comes to the centers, that's how you win in the NHL with Stützle, Dylan Cousins. Shane Pinto is back after missing half the season due to his suspension as well. So I think that Ottawa is really built for at least winning a round or two, getting a Vezina goaltender. Jake Sanderson's a number one D there, or at least getting on his way to being one. So I think this is exactly for Ottawa. It's like about about time for them to make the playoffs, and it's actually manifesting on the ice. And yeah, Montreal, maybe a year ahead of schedule for them. They got guys bought in. Slavkovsky has definitely developed well, even though there were some bumps in the road for them. Lane Hudson, my goodness, leading all rookies in points. I know Macklin Celebrini missed a little bit of time, but still being a leader as a defenseman, you got to be, there's no clear cut winner of the Calder Trophy this year. It's a little bit of a challenge of a race for that. So I think it's a really great situation that Montreal finds themselves in. And Lane Hudson, he was a second round pick. So that's another thing for how he's been able to carry that blue line, especially when they're on the power play, which how he can run it.
It was not that long ago when we were looking at Montreal and saying, what a reach to get Slavkovsky first. What are they going to do with Carey Price? This was recent, right? A couple of seasons ago. We were wondering all these things and all this money that was hanging over their heads. And the pressure was still there on them to try to figure something out. And then, of course, you remember in the bubble, they had an amazing run that was a little bit of luck, right? I mean, they brought their horseshoe. Good for them. But, in the intervening years, it's interesting to see how Montreal is really, in a hockey culture not known for patience, tried to exude patience and say, look, this is now a process for us. We need to rebuild this franchise and come back from all this stuff. And I do think, Armando, to your point, new ownership helps in certain cases with like an Ottawa or whatever. But if you're Montreal, I don't think there's any excuse in the world that fans can come up with, well, figure it out, that you need to get this going right now. But for whatever reason, I think it's a little crazy right now that they're all like, oh yeah, no, 8th is good. 8th is good. We're doing okay. I've never seen this before. And so I think for those reasons, and we talk about the young players developing and all of that, I think it's actually helping this team build confidence.
Yeah.
Which is easy to shatter in Montreal. So I'm curious to see, not this year, but next year and the year after that, what this team is going to be like. Because in this weird, maybe we're in a parallel hockey dimension, people are actually letting them grow into a team, which should be interesting.
And then the other two teams in the East I wanted to touch on, I think Columbus is playing with house money in their underdog quest for the playoffs. I think there's a lot of sentimentality behind that team. Whereas Detroit is in year 27 of the Yzer plan now without a playoff berth. And I exaggerate for effect, but is Yzerman going to start feeling some heat if they don't make it?
I feel so. And the thing is, like Steve Yzerman, he's one of those guys also who doesn't, when you ask him a player of how he feels about someone, he'll immediately shut you down. It's one of the quietest front offices in all of the NHL when it comes to just information not leaking out of there. But he's also not going to give you an expectation on where he thinks a team is going to land. And that could be frustrating for fans. And there may be a lack of transparency when it comes to the direction of the team. But I mean, it's a beautiful arena that they have, and they still haven't hosted a playoff game there. I mean, thankfully they've gotten a bump, especially on special teams with Derek Lalonde being back in the mix. But you got to also find a way to win these games at 5-on-5, which has been a real big struggle for the Detroit Red Wings. And I think for the Columbus Blue Jackets, it's just it's not that the thing is for them is you eventually run out of gas for them, and there was a big emotional boost, especially from the Stadium Series at the Horseshoe, but it felt like they put a lot of that emotion there, and it was hard for them to maintain it after. So that I feel like for them, they're just running out of gas. But hey, Zach Werenski's having a great season. Elvis Merzlikins is the number one goaltender, but I just think when it comes to the other teams in front of them, I think it's going to be too much of a hill to climb.
I want to give Columbus credit for being a better team than I think people thought they were, especially in the wake of off-season tragedy and coming in. They could have easily fell right to the bottom and no one would have blinked an eye.
Yeah.
So I give them organizationally a ton of credit for even being where they are. But would I peg them a playoff team? No. And I think they've overachieved a bit this year, and it's something to build on. When it comes to Detroit, I think it's interesting that we kind of cast an eye at teams that miss on signings and wonder, okay, and it seemed like Yzerman never missed before, right? But all of a sudden now in year 74, I think, Gil, not 72, of the Yzer plan, we're at a point where it seems like you're missing on signings you need to nail, like a Ville Husso. Things like that you need to absolutely get right in order to advance the team, and they're not. And it's setting you back sometimes a season when you don't get these things right. So that's why I think patience in Detroit is going to start to wear thin, even for an organizational great like Steve Yzerman. And here's the other thing. The fact that, as Armando pointed out, he shuts everybody down, doesn't tell you what he's thinking, the whole thing shrouded in mystery. Guess who doesn't like that? Fan bases. They hate that. It's just information abhors a vacuum. It's like, there's going to be talk then. There's going to be questions. There's going to be all this stuff. And when there's no answers coming from the top, people are going to invent their own.
They are. And Steve Yzerman may not like the answers that people end up inventing. So we'll see how that plays out. Little pressure, though, in Motown right now for the Detroit Red Wings, who have missed the playoffs. What did they make it? 25 years in a row. And now they've missed it. I think it's 7 or 8 years in a row. So it's been a long time by Detroit Red Wing standards. All right, the Western Conference. Who feels the pressure out there? We'll get to that and more coming up on the NHL Squad. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. We've got 3 teams in the Central Division that are just absolutely contenders and fighting tooth and nail. You got Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado. You add the whole Mikko Rantanen drama in it, and there's a little bit more juice maybe even than normal to this rivalry, especially Dallas and Colorado. Let's start with the Jets. How much pressure is on this team, especially considering there could be some players not back next year in Winnipeg?
Winnipeg is interesting, Gil, because they've been under pressure since they got there, quite frankly. They were initially told, I think there was patience in years 1 through 4, which I remember when they came in. I was still with Nashville then. There was patience for them to get the ball rolling, get things going. And right about year 5, people started to go, okay, it's time to win a cup. But that's the kind of pressure that's been there since then. This year, when you're having the regular season you have, in my opinion, the best goaltender in the NHL. You have really good depth up front. You have a really nice defensive core. But look, we've talked about it this whole show. Teams face decisions every year on big-time names. But this is the year of all years for Winnipeg to get it done, because they seem to be able to handle anything thrown at them. They've gone about their business. They are one of the best defensive teams in the league. They have pretty darn good 5-on-5 scoring. They have a pretty good special teams. Everything seems to be together right now. And I think that anything less than showing up in the Stanley Cup final and hoisting that cup is labeled a crushing disappointment.
Yeah, it's funny because after Aaron Ekblad got suspended, and even after the Seth Jones trade, I was looking at one of the defensemen that the Panthers could sign in the offseason. One of them was Neil Pionk. He's going to be a free agent for the Winnipeg Jets. So that's also a player that could possibly be gone if they don't advance further in the postseason. And this is since 2018, since they made the Western Conference Final, out in the first round, second round sweep against the Montreal Canadiens in the shortened season. Didn't make the playoffs. out in the first round against the Vegas Golden Knights after winning game 1, and then last year in losing to the Colorado Avalanche in 5 games after that 7-6 game 1 last year, which Connor Hellebuyck even spoke publicly that he couldn't see the pucks like he did in the regular season. So there's a lot of that pressure. Even another free agent for them is Nikolai Ehlers. He's going to get quite the payday this coming offseason. So it's the bills coming due for the Winnipeg Jets for them. So I think that there's a lot of pressure, especially with how they were able to start off this season. So I mean, they've created themselves a cushion. They're going to get home ice all throughout the Western Conference playoffs. So the whiteout is it's exciting to be a part of, but you gotta produce some wins along with that.
Guys, you know what's interesting is Colorado's resurgence in Winnipeg's dominant season has allowed Dallas to slide right under the radar. The most exciting thing they did was Rantanen. And once the hubbub died down around that, they're right back under the radar again. And Dallas is always, they worry me. They're sneaky. They're good. Again, one of the best goaltenders in the game. They're primed, and I think they will catch teams unaware, which is weird to say about the Dallas Stars.
I feel it's all going to depend on if Miro Heiskanen is even going to play because there's also talk about whether he's actually going to play, whether or not he's actually going to play in the first round. And I know that the Dallas Stars haven't necessarily had the best record since they traded for Mikko Rantanen, but you know, the playoffs are a whole different season. And my goodness, you got to give a lot of credit to the Colorado Avalanche of how they've remade their roster from night 1 all the way to now, switching up their goaltending, getting a middle 6 center in Brock Nelson, bringing back Eric Johnson, a 7th defenseman for them, who was part of their Stanley Cup run just a few years ago. So Marty Necas, who is having exploding at the beginning of the season with the Carolina Hurricanes, which I want to make a correction from my first segment. Jordan Stahl's contract does not expire, by the way, this coming season. There's another season after that. But still, for Colorado to turn over the roster the way they did, they're one of those teams where you don't have to, I don't think they have to have home ice advantage in order to go into another barn and win consistently in the postseason.
One team you touched on, Armando, earlier was the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver, Calgary, both right now on the outside looking in, but still in the hunt. Which team has more pressure and why?
6 points behind for Vancouver, 7 for Calgary, and once again it's the Canucks with how they got with 1 game away from the Western Conference Final last season and all the drama. But honestly, even for the Calgary Flames, Jonathan Huberdeau has had a little bit of a resurgence, and Justin Wolfe, after winning 2 AHL MVPs, has been the greatest story for him. He's going to be in the Calder conversation as well. I don't think he wins it, but giving them a chance to win night in and night out, and just unfortunately, he's not getting the goal support that he needs there. But for Calgary, a little bit of pressure for them, at least to do something next year now that those guys, Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau, are getting on the older side. For them, it's just really about surrounding those guys with more of a scoring punch. So I don't think they end up making it this year, but they were playing a lot better than expected. But I never expected for the Flames to bottom out neither.
I got news for you guys. The West is set.
Yeah.
It's not going to change. And Vancouver's schedule does not allow them to get back in, even if they suddenly found the recipe. But Vancouver's going to melt down. Mark my words. In 2 weeks, this team is going to melt down. They already are internally. And externally, the pressure cooker is finally going to blow. So, that's the pressure is on them, but it's too late.
And you got to give credit to St. Louis for what they've done. I mean, without Colton Parayko for a while there, they've been able to still find a way to win. I mean, just the amount of guts it took for the management of the Blues to put those offer sheets for Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway for them, and then they've developed into players who could help a team that's on the playoff bubble for them, as because even going into last offseason, the talk for St. Louis's blue line was, look at all of these defensemen who have like no trade or no move clause. But if you look at their Puckpedia page, a lot of those no move clauses go to modified no trade clauses in the coming season. So they're able to still transition and retool things for them coming up. And with the scoring punch of Jordan Kyrou, the speedster, and Robert Thomas, a playmaker. I think they're a dangerous team. And let's give our flowers to Jordan Binnington, who we've doubted so much, even before Four Nations, even though he was a Stanley Cup champion and still able to perform when the lights are brightest. And as of right now, they're going to be that team who's going to go to Winnipeg for round one. And I don't think it's going to be, for the expert analysts who will pick the series, I don't think it's going to be a clean sweep of people just picking Winnipeg. I think that St. Louis could possibly sneak up on them.
Two teams that seem to face each other every year. Who has more pressure, the LA Kings to finally beat the Edmonton Oilers, or the Edmonton Oilers to finally win a Stanley Cup?
Oilers have more pressure. Yeah. And it's not even close, because the Oilers are supposed to win the Cup this year, remember?
Yep.
And they're nowhere near. They're not good enough this year. I'm sorry, Edmonton. But the Kings, I don't think it's so much the pressure to finally beat the Edmonton Oilers. It's the pressure to finally show everybody that you're the team that you've been selling to your fan base that you are. So Los Angeles is better than I thought they'd be this year, but Edmonton, oof, I would not want to be in that locker room after a first-round loss.
Yeah, and the injuries aren't helping for them right now. Stuart Skinner, Leon Draisaitl, and Connor McDavid, even though Leon Draisaitl is closer to 50 and getting there and helping carry that team for them. But this is LA's best chance to do it. They barely lose at home. They're likely going to have home ice in the first round. So if it benefits any team, it's going to be the LA Kings, and they also own the tiebreaker in regulation wins with 9 games left for both of them. So this is their best chance. If it's not now, then when for the LA Kings? And Anze Kopitar is aging like fine wine. Darcy, look at a win-win situation for a trade in Pierre-Luc Dubois and Darcy Kemper. Now look at what's going on with both teams in just a better situation for them. And you got to give Rob Blake a lot of credit for admitting to a mistake from signing that contract and then being able to make up for his mistake before it got even worse for them. So credit to the LA Kings for making that happen. And also there is more pressure on Edmonton, but we'll see if it finally manifests for the LA Kings in a round one win. This is their best chance.
Going to be a fun stretch drive, no question about that. And of course, we will have coverage of it across the Locked On NHL network. I want to thank everyone for making the Squad Show your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I want to thank you, Tom, and you, Armando, for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for listening to and watching the NHL Squad Show.